Thank you, everybody, for coming back here to our Student Voices panel. This is an additional element that we have added a little bit later, but I'm very happy to see that so many of you have signed up for an opportunity to speak about the things that did not get enough space. And the format is the following. We have almost all student speakers. Aryan Salman will join us in a second and get the outside seat up on stage with me. I will read in alphabetical order the names of the people who've signed up and their topics. Everybody has 5 minutes. And then after we're through, we'll sit all here together and we'll organize questions from the audience if you'd like to engage with what has been said. So without further ado, thank you for being back here, and let's listen to Sai Hosni Bandela, who'd like to talk about peace.
Is this okay? Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, good evening to everybody who's here. I am Sai Krishni Bandela. My pronouns are they, them. And I'm here to talk about peace as a core value. And I know that at a time when our world is facing, unprecedented challenges, and commitment to peace is more vital than ever right now. And then, peace is not just absence of conflict, but more of dignity and people having the right to have healthcare, education, their basic rights, right? So, I'm going to reiterate the point as to why peace is the foundation of public policy. I'm sure all of you know it. But it's, again, it's to maintain societal stability, well-being, and peace is integral to this mission. And peaceful societies are where individuals thrive and governance structures support harmonious coexistences. And in international relations, peace is important in diplomacy and conflict resolution and international cooperation. And I'm sure there's nothing that anybody would disagree here. And I would also like to point out that this is more of a remark and less of a speech. And why do we need to talk about peace in the context of Hertie? We need to talk about peace in the context of Hertie because Hertie does have some core values, which are, and I quote, academic integrity, academic freedom, transparency, sustainability, mutual respect, diversity, and inclusion for stewardship of the public good, right? And I think that all of this is void and hollow without peace. In what context are you talking about inclusion? In what context are you talking about sustainability? And oftentimes, Hertie likes to take a neutral stance. But I believe, and this is something I want to put forth, that you cannot have neutrality in your value system. You can have neutrality when you have to pick a side which you don't want to do, that's all right. But then you cannot have neutrality when you have values, right? You are either for a value or you're not. And this is also especially important because Hertie in the past has taken stance for peace. We talk about peace in sustainability. We talk about peace in digital governance and in various forms. But we often cherry pick where we want to talk about peace and at what times we want to be for peace. It's when, Hertie is threatened as an institution, or Europe is threatened as an institution, or for that matter, the Western world being threatened. That's when we choose to pick the sides, and that's when we are for peace. But then when people like us, most part of Hertie, in fact, who are from the global south, we face the brunt of climate change. Pakistan has floods all the time, right? And we also the US and the UK also funds India in their weapons and arms. Israel funds India in arms, right? And likewise the other way around. So that's why I think Hertie not being able to call for a ceasefire because peace is not our core value is quite ironic. And peace needs to be a core value because all of our other core values do not make sense in the absence of peace. And also it's, again, we also need to talk about how, when we talk about transparency and having an academic discourse, if people do not feel like we can't come together at a value system level, at the level of peace, we cannot actually have a common ground to talk and discuss things in a community level, not just at the academic level, right? Not just at the research level. So, and also the fact that there are students at Hertie who come from like conflict zones that are directly or indirectly funded by the Western world, by the EU. And I'm sure it's gonna get worse now that we have seen the EU Parliament results in Germany, France, and other countries. So in this scenario, when we talk about like understanding today, I think it's really important that we incorporate peace as one of our core values. And again, like not cherry pick and not pick what the European world thinks is peaceful, but rather like talk about peace in like various contexts. And of course, like this is not just just add peace to your code of conduct. Like that's not the recommendation that I'm giving, but rather to have more conversations about what peace means and what peace means for like people from like different contexts, and what peace are we like supporting, and what our positionality with respect to be it conflicts or be it sustainability, because we are talking about peace in an all-encompassing sense. So I think that is really important, and I hope these conversations don't just end with this room or forum, and this is something that we take forward in our discussions in our classrooms and at a community level to actually bring something out of it. Because often we have these spaces and we discuss this and we forget, and I hope, and I'm sure the others are gonna have great talking points as well, and I hope we continue to talk about this further. And it's also like not just a direct indicator or attack towards the administration, but it's also towards the student community, because we get to shape what this institution is, and we should have the power to do that. Thank you.
Thank you to Sai Posni Vandela. And the person next up is Samantha Beekman on insensitivity and irresponsibility regarding students' legitimate concerns.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Prush, and thanks to all of my fellow students who signed up to speak today. And thank you to Cornelia and the Hertie administration for providing this opportunity for us to have some much-needed conversations that we've been missing here. My name is Samantha Beekman. I'm a second-year MPP student graduating in just 2 weeks. Congratulations to everyone else who's here as well. But I'm going to talk a bit more about a topic that is a bit more serious and a bit more close to home, especially for me as a graduating student, as an international student here in Germany. I'm originally from the US, and I am here to say that Germany is not a safe place for anyone, including Hertie students such as myself, in terms of censorship, oppression, and academic freedom. You may have heard from the panel earlier. I regret that I had work during that time. It was a very interesting topic. It was entitled Higher Education and Research in Hard Times. And they discussed, quote, the mission of universities to ensure freedom of expression and critical inquiry, shielding their faculty and students from political and economic pressures. The Hertie School at times has at best been silent and abstained from speaking out to protect its students who come from over 70 countries, and as such are disproportionately more vulnerable as international students here in Germany. At worst, there have been times when Hertie and its administration has weaponized the political context and its own platform, which has had a chilling effect on student rights and activism, at times even leveraging this against its own students. In October, more than 80 students signed a letter calling upon the Hertie School to take a more just and critical stance on Israel-Palestine as a university committed to training the leaders and policymakers of tomorrow. The quote, hope that the Hertie School management still lives up to its announcement of organizing a moment of exchange on this topic has largely gone for 9 months unanswered. I'm grateful for President Woll for agreeing to a few internal meetings with students, but I feel that these meetings have largely been followed by insufficient direct statements and actions, with little indication that this hostile and oppressive environment will be further mitigated, although I do again appreciate this opportunity today to speak about these issues. On the contrary, students have been told by Hertie administration to rather study at Trinity College in Dublin if we agree with the Hertie School's approach, citing that peace is not a core value of our institution, which is what sparked the speech you heard earlier from my peer. The academic and political pressure in recent months is exacerbated, as I mentioned, for international students who share a much greater burden when researching, educating, and communicating about Gaza here in Germany. The premier example of this threat that's posed to us is this proposed Berlin Higher Education Act, which would allow for students to be expelled from universities for political reasons, and it comes as a direct response to advocacy for Palestine among a minority of largely non-German students and academics at German institutions. This law change would mean that students across Berlin may be expelled for actions such as putting up posters, disrupting lectures, holding sit-ins, and openly criticizing their professors. And as international students such as myself, student status may be tied to your job, your housing, and your very right to stay in Germany. 6 Hertie clubs, which regularly interact with vulnerable groups, minorities, and activists, banded together to advocate for Hertie to leverage its relationships to advocate for students' concerns about this law. In response, students have been told by Hertie staff that, quote, emailing Hertie administration on this issue will only result in laughter behind closed doors. Bodies within the university, including the DEI office, as well as Hertie student representation, would ideally serve to protect students in these vulnerable positions, but have instead at times served to silence students' concerns and quell discontent in recent months, when they have been available to us at all. And on several occasions since October, Hertie administration has wielded the code of conduct to threaten students lest they partake in bad behavior, rather than supporting its students who have faced increasing oppression while advocating for peace. The very format of this event, which was not disseminated through regular student channels such as campus news for students to be aware of, and for which students had only 3 days to register and 1 short week to prepare, reflects this state. This very dialogue, which I was informed on my way in is being referred to as a debate, I hope not, that's news to me, is noticeably absent from the program for the Anniversary Forum these past 2 days. And that we have 5 minutes to unilaterally voice our concerns in what is in fact less of a dialogue or opportunity for conversation, but more of a lecture and an intimidating spotlight is illustrative. It's a bit difficult to stand in front of you all and say these things. But on these issues, we cannot simply agree to disagree without harming Hertie's reputation and future prospects, which I value as a soon-to-be alumna of this university, which I care about and which I've made great memories at these past 3 years. It is not us as students who I feel should be questioned by the audience, but the Hertie administration who should be put on the spot and asked to answer the broader criticism that Hertie has taken no moral stand, let alone the lack of advocacy for and protection of its students in recent months. Thank you all for your time, and thank you, Cornelia, again for this opportunity.
Thank you to Samantha Beekman for the statement. And next up is Jimena Stefani Docamo Kailaya, who wants to speak about where politicians come from. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Woll, for this opportunity. When I received this invitation, I was not sure about what we can talk, and that's why I decided to talk about my thesis. It's a little bit different from I think other topics in this panel, but I have this strong feeling that what I want to share with you could be interesting or important in the context that we are living now. I want to introduce myself in a different level. Beyond my current studies at Hertie, I was working fostering civic engagement in the last 2 decades. And in the last decade, I was fostering political engagement. I was training young politicians. And all my life, I saw so many people joining politics, so happy and so excited and trying to do something different in the world. I come from Peru. My experience was that. And for me, it's very shaking, how I can see these people trying to go to politics, which is a very hostile environment, and how citizens express about politicians. And contrasting this all my life was like challenging for me because I feel that I need to convince people that politicians are also good, which is weird to say it out loud. And in all these years, I listen a very repetitive cycle, you know, people who start sometimes in their family, in some way, in their families, and then in the school they receive a kind of role model or leadership role, and then they move to the university where they can like live in some way politics also, and I am very happy to see you here doing a little bit of politics in this space, and then someone receive a call to action and they move to the political arena. Sometimes they are being trained to be a politicians. Some people is trying to do, I don't know, like fostering other like participation for others, or running for office in the best cases. And for me it was like, okay, I can see the cycle, you know, like people who enter, people who is super engaged, and then sadly people who leave. And this was the sad part, because I saw amazing people joining politics and then being so disappointed that they were to leave, they have to leave, and they didn't want to come back to do politics. And I took these 2 years of, I don't know, breathing and being in an academic environment to reflect on that, to reflect on why people is feeling so disappointed, and which I understood in this last year being supervised by Professor Maya, is that disengagement is not equal to being disappointed about politics. Disengagement could be related to different issues. And of course, could be disappointment, but also there is a lot of issues that could be circumstantial. For instance, if you have to support your family, if you have financial issues, you are going to leave politics, because you cannot face in a daily basis being like, I don't know, having a job and doing politics. A second level is political parties and the organizational level, and of course we need to do it better and stronger, but this is a call for political parties, of course. And the second level is systemic, and we don't have so much to do as an individuals there, but we should be worried about that, because violence not only against women, but also against politicians in general. We saw that in the last weeks in the elections in Europe. We saw that we were touched as an institution with like our colleague in Mexico also being like violented during the elections. And I think that like this cycle makes that people leave politics, and some people wants to come back, and I am very happy that I saw people in some cases after 40 years coming back to politics, which is amazing, but other people remain inactive, and we need to like maybe do it better for all of us to have better politicians. And the second cycle that I saw, and I need 1 minute more only, is that this is what I mentioned is an individual cycle, you know, like how people face in some way their stages in their life, but there is a cycle as an individuals, as a society, because we have like these motivations that driven us to be in this political engagement cycle, and this is enabled, as far as I can see, for 3 different enablers. The first one is a democratic culture that we all are building in the society. The second one is the political education, and in Germany, I think with all these lifelong learning public policies are a little bit better, but in other countries, this is reduced to only 1 class course about civic education for some months. And the third one is strong political parties, because if we have an amazing system, if we can dream about that, but we don't have political parties who can absorb all these people who is ready to go to politics, nothing is going to change. And maybe my goal this afternoon is to continue to reflect on that, to don't think that all the politicians are bad. I thought I saw so many people who is amazing doing politics, but like to support our democracy, understanding that they are also humans and they are trying to do sometimes the best. And of course, this is a call also for you guys, join in politics. Because if we want change, we need to make it better from our own decisions to represent others like outside. Thank you very much for my time.
Thank you very much to Jimena for the statement. Next up is Namrita Morali on the diversity of worldviews needed in a university stance.
Thank you. I hope this is not too loud. Okay, all right. Let me begin with Hertie's quote on the use of Calvin report, which is the Hertie School as an institution does not issue public statements on contemporary political events, as a university is a space for research and learning, not a political organization. However, the Hertie School has also agreed that it has deviated from its stance, and I would like to first present 2 instances when this particular guideline has been breached. This is an email excerpt from the then acting President Dr. Halleberg on the invasion of Ukraine. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has already cost too many lives and represents a humanitarian strategy. We will engage with this crisis as a community, and the first activity will be a roundtable bringing together 3 professors from Hertie. The second excerpt is from Dr. Woll's email, just stating Israel on the subject. Terrible news has reached us from Israel this weekend. We are horrified by the appalling attacks launched by Hamas and utterly condemn these acts of terror and killing of abduction civilians. As a university, thank you. Our contribution is to make sense of political events through discussion and learning, and we are working on offering a moment of exchange on the current state of Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the coming days. It's not up to me to decipher what the differences in these 2 states are when there's clearly acts of violence, contemporary political events. But of course, there's no clear reason on why these exceptions were made and when these exceptions were made. It's not about the issuance of these statements per se, because as a policy school, I deeply believe we're involved in contemporary political events and we should be able to issue these statements. But I find it disappointing that Hertie shields itself behind Calvin's report when its narrative does not warrant unequivocal acceptance on campus. When students attempted to address this disparity, we were given code of conduct as a way to guide our dissatisfaction. I would like to quote a relevant clause, which just brings my point here. The Hertie School does not discriminate on basis of inter alia race, ethnicity, national origin, color, sex, disability, religion, or worldview. I pause there. What does this worldview mean? I come from India. India was the first non-Arab state to recognize PLO as the sole authority and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people in 1974, and was among the first countries to recognize the state of Palestine in 1988. In contrast, Germany does not diplomatically recognize Palestine. Now, this is a differing worldview. While our perspectives on Ukraine might have been similar, and hence there was no big uproar, this is an instance of why we differ on Palestine. Some of the observations I've made on Hertie's statements so far. Palestine is first not mentioned in the communication, starting from the first email, unless, of course, it is to reference as Israel-Palestine, but never in itself or on the civilians that are being affected. When the gap was highlighted earlier in a letter signed over by 160 Hertie students and alumni, there was no response on a clear way forward. So I really don't know where our perspectives counted. Palestine is not provided the benefit of context because it starts with Hamas and it ends with Hamas, but what about the context? Even in its attempts to hold space, the school managed to get a representative from Israel, but not a single representative from Palestine when it's spoken also about Palestine. There are also students from Hertie who hail from previously colonized countries, like I do. Imposing perspectives on Germany's unique responsibility like something we don't understand what this responsibility is, as an erstwhile oppressor on those who have had history of oppression, lacks sort of a critical thought. Germany's unique responsibility, which I completely understand, rooted in its history, should not dictate the narrative on issues like the Palestinian genocide. Doing a genocide doesn't give one moral authority on the topic. The absence of discussions, on the other hand, on Israel's actions, which are recognized internationally as violations of international law, even if you don't agree with me on the term genocide, and the lack of Palestinian representation in such dialogues reflects a very biased approach. here are some things I would have expected to see. This is not just about like complaining. I would like to see if Hertie really, truly wants to strive for a harmonious, non-political space for research and learning. Firstly, adherence to your stated policies. If you're using Calvin report, stick to Calvin report. But if you would like to make exemptions, then please be clear on this transparency and consistency with when you would breach and why you would breach. Balanced panel and events. If you're speaking about a country, please do not have an event that does not have a representative from the said country. If we had an event on Russia and Ukraine, if all the representatives were from Russia and no one from Ukraine, that would not fly here. But why does it fly in another case? Policy review committees, established committees, including student representatives, to clearly review and update institutional policies related to political statements, academic freedom, and also our academic partnerships. I know my colleague here would be speaking a little bit further, but I personally would have liked to be considered or even asked of whether, as an alumni of the student institution I pay all this money to, would like to have a partnership with apartheid state. I would not like to be associated with such a place, but I was not asked of it. So please feel free to include these decisions in the ambit of some established committees. And of course, reaffirm the institution's commitment to academic freedom, encourage diverse faculty to explore and discuss a whole range of political issues without fear of censorship. That brings it to an end. Thank you very much for your time. And also thank you, Dr. Woll.
Thank you to Namrita Morali for the statement. And next up is Johannes Müller on a nonviolent academic environment in emotional debates.
Oops. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank President Woll and all the leadership for the opportunity to speak up. I think it's very good to have a maybe statement or debate. Let's see where we are ending with the discussion of student voices, as training the students is a core part of school. Second thing, I want to start as a data scientist in training with a bold claim about the sample size of students that we see here, that I will not show any numbers to prove, but you either agree with me or not, or follow my theory. My claim is that this representation that is very critical with the way the university is handling this emotional conflict is like this representation here is not how the majority of students see it. However, it's very engaged people that picking up the microphone here. I'm very thankful for that. But what I'm not thankful at all for, quite the opposite, what I condemn, is first of all smearing on the walls outside. I don't want to point any fingers to anyone, but clearly it must have been someone from the Hertie family, as we call it, that thought, oh, it's a good opportunity, Minister of Defensive here, I write, what was it called? I think Stop Arming Israel in red color on the entrance, which now for more than 6 hours is cleaned by 3 people who have not have the privilege that we have to study here, but who are working all day long. You could have picked up the microphone in the session after the defense minister and aimed that very question to the defense minister. You did not have the courage to. Instead, you played over some microphones. I think this was kind of a protest, some names of victims in Gaza, which I think, we have to remember victims from all sides. But using them in this way is not doing your aims any favor. In fact, it is very undemocratic because you don't show your face when you make the statements and let people answer to your claims. So this is, again, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, but it must have been someone from our Hertie community. And this is not the way forward that we should discuss things. I want to continue in the mentioning of the debate just before that we had with Joseph Weiler and Professor Randeria, who is fortunately still here. Weiler had to leave. I will quickly summarize it, also because some panelists were not able to attend. You can maybe later discuss with her. But first thing, the idea was a strategic restraint from university, and also Professor or President, sorry, Randeria was mentioning that she was not able to follow this line all the time, but she came back to this strategic restraint in terms of universities commenting on political issues. Because it's not beneficial for anyone, and it's just hindering the freedom of speech and debate. This was the second core principle that was agreed upon. But then the third one, and this is also what I want to remind everyone of, is the dignity of the institution. And this comes also, or this is connected to the form of protest. So we want to hear all the voices, and this was also made sure here, from the left to the right, from the south to the north, but do so in a democratic discourse where everyone can speak and all arguments will be heard and then answered. I think this is also important to notice. We here at the Hertie School have the opportunity to raise our voices. So don't victimize yourself by saying you can't say anything. There are, in fact, I think not many countries worldwide where you can formulate more freely what you want. Also Berlin, you know, I'll be coming back to that later, but Germany is trying to find, as a society, a role that is respecting both sides, and is in fact, or has been for a very long time, a big funder also of the Palestinian cause. So let's not victimize ourselves, but enter a public debate. Having said that, I think the majority, as I said, of the students support the course that we have here at Hertie. We have so far not been at the center of the violent protests, either at FU or at Humboldt. And the only thing, and this is now my take, how do we communicate more fair in these debates, is we have to set rules for what you can say or not. This was especially evident in the WhatsApp groups after October 7th, and there were anti-Semitic let's say, comments. So it was very clear to a student initiative of us that Hertie has to act. And we advocated for accepting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition on anti-Semitism. I know, unfortunately, this didn't found a consensus alone in the faculty. So there was added the Jerusalem Declaration. I think that is not good, because we are leaving a door open to Israel-related anti-Semitism that is closed by every other university in Germany, as well as the federal or the big democratic parties, federal governments, and also the big parliaments. Nonetheless, I think it's good that we've clarified, or that we're on the way to clarify what anti-Semitism means here at Hertie. Let me conclude by saying, you know, we here, we are an international university that is very happy to welcome all different voices from worldwide, but we are not placed anywhere. We're placed somewhere here in Berlin. So I think this comes with a historic obligation to conduct like free speech discourse, fight for human rights, and try to like preserve them in all current conflicts around the world. Criticize all governments, including the German one and the Israeli one, of course, but doing so without delegitimization of any international player or country without demonization of any group or nation, not allowing us to judge by any double standards. So what I would say in short, understand today and shape tomorrow by engaging in a democratic discourse that is fair and non-violent, and this will become ever more important as we enter like a more conflict time. And this was an accident, I didn't plan to. I just want to show you one example how this could happen. So the socks I wear today are this one. I don't know if any one of you can read Arabic, but it's Habibi. It's a famous fashion brand, actually by a friend of mine from my hometown, that was founded because he wanted to make a statement that the Arabic letters themselves, they kind of made some people fear, and he wanted to counteract that by just saying Habibi, which is like bro or friend. That is the act of kindness or inviting everyone, right? So I think let's use the Habibi spirit when we go forward to have this discussion, not polarize ourselves even more, but find a good democratic discourse to solve the problem.
Thank you to Johannes Müller on, I like the word, the Habibi spirit, and we go over to Aryan Salman, who wants to talk about decolonizing global education.
Dear friends and colleagues, thank you for having me here today. It's a privilege to be speaking to you here. And congratulations to Hertie on turning 20. And we see today Hertie is being disciplined as a 20-year-old. So as a first-generation learner and an education leader, my concerns are deeply rooted in both my desire to contribute to Hertie's life and experience here, as well as Germany, and also to acknowledge the many people, the visionary folks who are daring to envision an EU that is grounded in global and humanistic values. Now, Hertie's call to action, understand today and shape tomorrow, is a bold and daring call, one that urges us to challenge the status quo and to change and shape a tomorrow that is more meaningful. To truly understand today, we must understand what happened yesterday and the day before it, and to understand the past, and as we say, looking back to move forward. So, as we do that, we also need to ask ourselves this question: what kind of tomorrow do we want to envision, and what kind of tomorrow we want to shape? Now, we understand that Hertie is a proud European private institution that aspires to be one of Europe's leading policy schools, and it has a keen desire to shape Europe's future. We have seen in the recent times, even the elite and the educated, the well-educated, are not immune to ignorance, they're not immune to bigotry, they're not immune to xenophobia, intolerance, as was in the case of the Silt Island, and also in many cases, many folks facing and feeling it. The rise of extremist politics is a stark reminder. It's a stark reminder of the emerging dangers to both German and European societies. Forget Silt, such a malady does not even spare elite and internationally minded institutions such as Hertie. Diversity without inclusion is meaningless, and I would like to thank Hertie for initiating this dialogue and including folks in the spirit of it. Now, the failure of our institutions and systems to undergo the necessary processes to genuinely dismantle the root causes of such maladies are detrimental not just to those who come in contact with them, but largely to the societies in which these institutions are. Last year, speaking to the European Parliament, German Chancellor Scholz said, and I quote, "European Union needs to change. Europe must turn to the world," unquote. He further added, that the world is increasingly becoming multipolar, and that Europe should look more for global cooperation on equal terms. Now, you cannot look at the world on equal terms with the lenses of Eurocentrism. For those of you who are new to this term or to the impact of Eurocentrism, a Eurocentric perspective is a narrow worldview that distorts our understanding of history, of humanity, of cultures, of politics, of policies, and global dynamics, hindering our ability to view the world as it is and leverage on vibrant diversity, shared humanity, and collective futures. Now, Eurocentrism in education does something far more dangerous, and that is falsification of knowledge, falsification of values, attitudes, behaviors, by presenting a skewed perspective that prioritizes European experiences and European viewpoints as universal. Now, what should Hertie do? Everything hinges on hope and our desire for change. Before I share the possible steps, there are two possibilities that lie ahead of Hertie. And the third one is not an option. That is silence, and it doesn't count. So we can either give results or we can give excuses. Now, this is what was my situation when I was trying to move to Europe and to Hertie. So when I decided to study at Hertie, all I had was around 300 euros in my account and around 15 days to be able to sort the money out, as well as to have the blocked account. Some of you know what it is. So it's something that you need to do before you even apply for a visa, right? So I could give myself this excuse that, oh, I just have 300 euros and I can't do it, or I could just work towards it. And that's what I did. Now, this is the story of my hope against all odds, and this is for another time. So I believe in the power of hope, and I think Hertie needs to dare and dream to hope for a better future for Europe, for Germany, and for the rest of the world. There are 8 things that Hertie can do to change the status quo and to meaningfully shape the future of Europe. First, recognize the difference between being pro-European and Eurocentric. These are 2 different things. To ensure a balanced and inclusive approach and initiate a broader dialogue around what it means to be pro-Europe and what it means to be Eurocentric. The second thing that Hertie could do is engage in serious efforts to deconstruct Eurocentric biases within curriculum, pedagogy, practices, and experiences at Hertie. Third, to have an established committee that looks at decolonizing structures within the Hertie School. Fourth, to actively recruit staff and students from historically marginalized regions and those affected by Europe's colonial past. Now, for example, if you see at the Hertie School, you would find very few people from the African continent. And it's very sad to see this kind of claim that we are in 70 countries, but what are the choices of countries we have? That's the question. So we need to also have people from all over the world and to try to create equitable spaces for them. Fifth, to build capacity of educators to use inclusive language and practices. I did attend one of the lectures where we had a backward country being named Anistan. Why is it not a land? So that's the question. So perhaps to reflect on the question of language. And sixth, to have a global North-South exchange program or to have initiatives that foster global North-South dialogue on the lines similar to the Geneva Graduate Institute, which is called the South Also Knows, which is quite interesting. Seventh, the school can reflect on its vision and consistently ask the question, what kind of tomorrow do we want to shape? What kind of Europe do we want to see? What kind of Germany we want to see? And use this as a guiding principle in all institutional decisions and actions. Now, taking all these actions might take time, might need resources, might be it's not the right time, or might be we don't have enough support. Now, these are all excuses born out of lack of will. So if, as a school, you decide to genuinely be a leader in educational reform, now is the time for you folks to act and to look at decolonizing education in genuine sense. Now, we know President Woll and Director Axel have expressed formidable leadership in increasing the prestige of this school. We have seen prominent folks from around Europe coming in, and that is a testament of to what leadership can do to even a small private institution in the heart of Europe. Now, the collective action in this regard of addressing the challenge of Eurocentrism in education can drive institutional credibility for Hertie, as well as save Europe from the demons that surround it, and save Europe from division, conflict, darkness, despair, isolation, and decline. Now, this is the most pro-European thing for President Woll, Mr. Bash, and others to take up, and that is to look at securing Europe in changing times and to ensure that you're looking at human and planetary flourishing through the lens of a truly global perspective, which is global and not just a worldview that is limited by our narrowness. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much to Arjan Salman for this statement on decolonizing global education. Next up is Helen Spangler with a very different topic, reform of AI guidelines. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for granting us this time. Yes, I realize my topic is really different to what we have so far. Nevertheless, I want to take up the stage and talk about a possible reform of the Hertie AI guidelines, because colleagues of mine and I worked on this last semester, in fact, in a course by Joanna Bryson, Governments of AI. And namely, these colleagues are Chengpo Ayun, Anna Kwaszewska, Maria Jose Lee, and Dimitro Sochniev. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here, but I'm still going to take up this topic anyway. So firstly, I want to appreciate that Hertie was the first university in Germany to publish AI guidelines, and that they also chose not to simply abolish the usage of AI as, for example, Sciences Po did. Because AI will change the way we work, especially also in academia, and simply ignoring it is not a solution. Nevertheless, the guidelines leave some room for improvement, which we personally experienced during the last day of a master thesis, which you can imagine we're really relaxed. We discussed a lot on how to cite the usage of AI. Should we cite it already if we used it for grammar and spelling checks? Should we include a declaration that we used it for a thesis? What is the correct way to actually apply it? Therefore, my colleagues and I picked up this topic, wrote a policy paper on it, to help students and instructors to more efficiently use AI and also know what a misuse of AI in the academic context is. I want to present two cornerstones of that policy paper. The first one is, we need to differentiate between the different applications of AI. There should be a classification system depending on how the usage of AI impacts academic integrity. There can be, for example, a category which has low impact on academic integrity, which are grammar and spelling tools. Those tools should be allowed and even encouraged. But then there could be a medium and high category, and the high category should be the usage of AI for content creation, which is already prohibited in the Hertie guidelines. But by including it in this framework of a classification, it makes it more clear for every student what is allowed and what is not allowed, and what is even encouraged. Moreover, this framework could even help to keep up with the development of the many AI tools which are popping up every day, because it is, as I said, a framework. You do not need to name every single AI tool there is and how it can be applied, but rather make students and instructors think on the impact of academic integrity. The second cornerstone I want to present is that we feel there should be a common knowledge space established at Hertie about AI tools. This stems from the fact that in our group alone, we had students of the data science course, which almost always discuss with instructors which AI tools can be allowed or used in class. I myself, I studied international affairs. I don't remember these discussions in class. And I feel like that is because there's no common knowledge base between students and instructors on which tools there are and how they can be used. Therefore, we suggest another Moodle page. Now, I know for those who are not studying at Hertie, Moodle is an intranet where you can access information, and there are lots of sites already. However, we feel that this site would be especially helpful to everybody. On the site, you could name the classification, you could name examples, you could have a tab for instructors on how to build exams that limit the possibility of using an AI, and you could have an FAQ page. Students and instructors alike would find information there, and it could really improve the teaching at Hertie. Moreover, I do think this is ready because, we're taught about citation tools like Citavio and Citaro, but never about the various AI tools there are. So overall, my colleagues and I really think that it is time to reform the AI guidelines at Hertie and introduce cornerstones like classification system and a common knowledge base. And I'm happy to send anyone our policy paper who wants to read it. Thank you.
Thank you to Helen Spangel for this presentation of the policy brief with your co-authors. And now the floor is to Caspar Steekstra on Hebrew University.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and staying until the last speech. Before I start, I would like to briefly answer to the claim that this panel is not a good sample size of the school. I won't deny that a thing like this attracts more opinionated students, but my fellow panelist, Johannes, although a data scientist in training, made this claim without any evidence. So just like his accusations of paint on walls and speakers during an event, and I also do not see how such accusations go together with the Habibi spirit. The last petition that was circulated around Hertie student body, calling for a ceasefire, among other things, had over 160 signatures, and that was back in November already. And I think anyone who has been monitoring the public opinion slightly can imagine that that number would be a lot higher now. And I also like to say that my speech will be very critical of the Hertie management, but this is not a personal thing or personal attack or anything. I do not have any negative feelings to anyone named in my speech, and I really appreciate all the effort that they do for the school, including organizing this event. Thank you. Imagine that before Russia invaded Ukraine, the Hertie School had an exchange program with a Russian university. After Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, this university, which happens to be close to Ukraine, decides to build an additional facility on Crimea. It will include a new faculty building and student dorms for exchange students. This means that Hertie students will probably stay on illegally occupied Ukrainian territory during the exchange semester at the Russian university. The Russian annexation of Crimea is a clear breach of international law, and therefore many legal scholars worldwide call on universities to cut their ties with the Russian university in question. In response, Hertie management ignores this call under the guise of academic freedom. However, years later, as Russia violently invades Ukraine, this request is made again. Should the Hertie School end its exchange program with the Russian university? I think and hope that most people in this room, including Hertie's leadership, would choose to cut ties with the Russian university. But if we translate this imaginary case to the real scenario of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, the Hertie School prefers to ignore international law rather than ending its exchange program. In a meeting between a group of students, President Cornelia Woll and Dean Turret Hustent, the president said that she would not cut this tie, even if there's a clear majority for it among students. More shockingly, in response to the fact that Hebrew University is partially built on illegally occupied Palestinian territory, the president responded, "We do not see it like that," implying that the Hertie School does not view illegal Israeli settlements for what they are, illegal. For those who don't know, Hebrew University's illegal settlement is built on the French Hill in occupied East Jerusalem. This area was unilaterally annexed by Israel in 1967, a move condemned by the international community. The UN Security Council ruled against this annexation in Resolution 478, classifying it as illegal and stating that Israel's justification for it is null and void. Therefore, settlements like the ones on the French Hill are not recognized by the European Union, the United Nations, the vast majority of countries worldwide, and nearly all international legal scholars. This means that Hertie's management is lonely in its view. Even multiple Israeli think tanks and NGOs have confirmed that the settlement is illegal under international law. Matter of fact, even the German government condemns the Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem. So as the Hertie School aims to train the leaders of the future, I wonder which example it seeks to set in the present. A management that openly disregards international agreements and legislation creates a bad precedent for tomorrow's politicians and policymakers. And as a university that teaches all its MPP, MIA, and MDS students international law, it is embarrassing that its leadership flouts the subject. To the Hertie School management, once again, I urge you to change your stance. Firstly, because openly disregarding international laws and agreements is unacceptable, especially for a governance school, and I honestly hope President Woll is reasonable enough to withdraw her words in defense of illegal Israeli settlements. Secondly, because now more than ever is the time to cut ties. Israel's most extreme right-wing government ever has killed more than 40,000 Palestinians, of which over 50% were women and children. That is more than 40 times the size of the student body of the Hertie School. Simultaneously, it has continuously blocked aid into the Gaza Strip, leading to a health crisis and the start of a famine. The majority of the Gazan population is displaced now, with no place left to go. 8 months into this hell, and Netanyahu is still unwilling to end this massacre for his own political survival. Even red lines of his strongest allies have been crossed, and even the non-arguments for self-defense, dialogues, and academic freedom are out of date. And on that matter, arguments for the latter ignore the political and moral context in which such academic freedom exists, and in which scope it is determined. They ignore the social responsibility that comes with that freedom. This is not a choice between academic freedom or not, because the scientifically justified choice to not enter into collaborations is also part of academic freedom. And if we want to defend academic freedom, we cannot accept one that is based on the oppression of the Palestinian people and the destruction of Palestinian academic infrastructure. Principally, as a governance school, Hertie should stay as far away as possible from international law violations, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Your students should not even have to tell you that. Yet, the leadership cannot even acknowledge borders widely agreed upon by the international community, let alone end its exchange program with an institution partially built on illegally occupied territory, to not even go into Hebrew university's ties to Israeli security agencies, responsible for the torturing and killing of many Palestinians who are detained without trial. Instead of paving the way towards a better future, Hertie's leadership is rather comfortable in its stance, like boiling frogs in a hot pan, contributing to the normalization of collective violence, dilution of the meaning of human rights, and the gradual erosion of the rules-based international order that it teaches so proudly. Thank you.
Thank you to Caspar Steixler for the statement on Hebrew University, and we're at the end of the points made by everybody, and I'd like to recommend all of you for speaking up. I know this is not an easy thing to do. It was mentioned by some. It is never an easy thing to do, but we want you to always be able to take the floor on topics that you know even might be uncomfortable in a room you do not know. And the best way to get there is to do it over and over and over again. So I hope this is a start of many other occasions, and I'd like to thank you all very much. We have the opportunity to open to comments from the room, and I will do so if you raise your hand. I would just like to respond to one thing, and that is Caspar's claim at the end to clarify the conversation we've been having already. Hebrew University is a university that was founded in 1925. It is created the historic campus on Mount Scopus in East Jerusalem, an area that was claimed as Israeli territory and already recognized as Israeli territory in 1949 in the Rhodes Agreements at a time when it was under siege and where it had to be ensured that university life could happen with the UN mission, and a convoy was going back and forth to this campus in Mount Scopus under siege until the Six-Day War in 1967. After 1967, when Israel claimed territory at the end of this war, East Jerusalem was part of it, as was the West Bank and other disputed territories as the Israeli state and colonized land as for a lot of these concern in effect settlements. Settlements are condemned. I very much agree with you. The disputed territories and the international law you cite was a very specific question, and that is, can the Knesset lay claims to a land after war that they've won unilaterally through domestic law? And international law has said that that is simply not possible, and that is something that absolutely everybody agrees with. But that doesn't mean that the entirety of the claimed land here under Israeli control is disputed as something that had belonged to Israel, and this is the case of Mount Scopus and Hebrew University. So that is just to clarify the legal setting. You're absolutely right in saying no domestic law can lay claims on lands unilaterally, and that is something we abide by. We do not think, and that is what I've said to you in conversation, that boycotting a university is the right way to criticize a government, in this case in particular, in Israeli university cases and in other instances. And I'd like to clarify something that you've quoted me in writing and now on stage again. I have not invited you to simply study at Trinity University. I have answered you in asking for a boycott of Israeli institutions and Hebrew University in particular, that we do not believe boycotting individuals and boycotting institutions in a time of conflict and criticism of a country's government is the right stance. That is something that is our institutional stance. Other universities have taken a different stance, and that is the case of Trinity College. That is an information you need to know, and you can make choices based on it. Of course, we're very happy that you're here. We're very happy to hear you disagree with us. I do not want to send you to Trinity. I just said that as an institutional stance to choose, also based on these, the Hertie School stance is not to boycott Hebrew University. But with this, let me give the questions to the floor, and then you can all get the mic back. Raise your hand, present yourself, the mics are in the back, and I think the game is grab it when you see it close to you and present yourself.
Thank you, I'm Vesna. I'm a first-year Hertie student in the MIA program. And coming from the Dutch perspective, like I grew up hearing stories about the horrors that happened in Nazi Germany, and now hearing the German perspective has been very interesting to look at the current issues that are going on. But from what I'm noticing is it's kind of dangerous if what happened in the past leads to paralyzation in the present. And just as I say, like, it's not Germany that did horrible things to my people. I'm from Rotterdam, like the city that was bombed. It's Nazi Germany who did it, it's the government. Saying that you're against the Netanyahu government doesn't mean that you're against Jewish people. It doesn't mean that you think it shouldn't be a two-state solution. And yeah, I think it's good to be aware of that in current context. I understand the history, I see the context, but don't let that paralyze you from criticizing governments and yeah, the decisions that are being made currently. That's just something I wanted to add. If anyone has a perspective on that, please add, but yeah.
Thank you. Let's collect 2 or 3 statements. I think we have the time, so just hand the mic around.
Hi, Amara Phillips. I'm a Hertie alumni. So one of you acknowledged that this wasn't in the program, which I noted as well, and I'm very curious for, I guess, the faculty and leaders of Hertie today, what's going to be taken away from this for the next 20 years at our next, or I guess our 40-year anniversary? What's going to be taken away from what the students here have said today, and what's going to change for the future?
Thank you very much. Third person who wants to say something? John, I will leave the students first. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Gevorg Avitikian. I'm currently at Leibniz Centrum Moderne Orient. I'm an alumnus of Central European University. I come from Armenia, but I also spent about a decade working for the international programs at European University, a private grad school and liberal oasis in St. Petersburg, Russia, until March 2022. I had to leave the university and also the country for obvious reasons. I very much enjoyed the previous panel, and I very much enjoyed the current panel. I'll try to figure this as a question, but I really wanted to also bring the personal background and the comment. I think the universities and university presidents are under tremendous pressure right now. I cannot probably agree more with most of you, rather say even all of you. But to turn this into a question, let's remember the panel that we had yesterday. It was, I think, about partially about polarization. So my question to you would be, I mean, I do see the emotion and also, like evidence-based arguments, etc. But do you agree that there is a little bit too much of polarization? If you do see that, how do you think you, as students, as future leaders, and as negotiating sides, as opposed to the university, what could you do to reduce the polarization? Because my last thing would be the example. I mean, I was very interesting to hear from President of CEU that, the story about the statement, 10 days of hesitation, etc. The school I worked for, based in St. Petersburg, on the very first days of the full-scale invasion of Russia, the rector made a rather blurry statement. Then they chose a creative way of dealing with the issue. They just switched the website of the university to black and white. There was no word statement, it was just a black and white website. And just recently I noticed that the school has brought back the colors. That means a lot. And one thing I really call you all to appreciate is the mere opportunity to have a panel like this. I mean, I do not say that you should be continuously thankful for the freedoms, etc., given to you. But still, as we heard also Frank Fukuyama talking about, not taking things as granted, please do care about that. Because even when we talk about boycotting or cooperating with the university, I do not know what Hertie's plans were, but even if Hertie wanted to cooperate with a Russian university right now, the university would be under the threat of, being persecuted criminally just for the mere fact of getting in touch with a Western liberal democracy school or something like that. So that's things to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's just see who wants to answer. I see 2, 3, 4 hands. Just grab the microphone. We have a second round of questions. I told her professors go a little bit second this time, but we'll take her in in just a second. Go and then we'll go.
So I first want to answer on this comment. I think it's incredibly important as individuals and as politicians to criticize all governments, right? And in fact, I think one of the problem of the conflict is that some of the politicians on the Israeli side maybe have been a little too confident that this criticism would not reach them. My point to make is that we have to do that fairly and to all sides and be aware of this widespread anti-Semitism, which has roots in right-wing, left-wing, in different religions, Christian, Muslim. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in our society that we live in, and it's very important to distinguish this. This was my whole point. Second thing, and as you, Kasper, answered to my speech, I also want to answer to your speech. The thing that I really do not understand as university scholars, how can you, with your initiative, not, enjoy the discussions with more partners in more different worlds, in a very difficult world. So I think from your initiative, what you should do is ask for Hertie to maybe have a Palestine exchange university instead of getting rid of the Israeli one, right? So there's this against mentality that is not leading us anywhere in a more polarized world. So do we want to cut ties with China University because of very severe human rights issues? Who's next? Will be isolated very soon. So this mentality of cutting ties, boycotting is just, I'm not MIA, right? But I can see that this is not leading us anywhere. So instead of fighting against something, why not doing the quite opposite?
Let's maybe take 2 other, Namrita, and then Simina, you can also answer, and then we'll open it back up. I know several people want to speak. Okay. I'll take a couple of minutes over time. Namrita.
Thank you. I personally don't want to point fingers. This is not an argument, but whoever wants to, feel free to. One, first of all, people's lives are not your debate topic. There are actual lives at risk here. This is, if you're very uncomfortable with how this is not more polite, this is not comfortable, and this is making you uncomfortable, Sure, you're not uncomfortable, but your life is not at risk. The reason people are uncomfortable because there are other people that are at risk. It's okay to say, let's not victimize ourselves. The victims cannot be here. People representing the victims were not invited here. People representing the victim were not given the space or the platform in any other initiative that was there. So if we are trying to portray a point, it's not victimizing ourselves. It's a position that you would not understand because of where you were born from, what your politics were, and what your country's history was. So don't ask someone to not victimize themselves if you don't come from the same position. It's not okay. Second, expecting this is not some positivity yoga class. People cannot have positive mentality against genocide. That's not a thing. That doesn't go together. People can ask for Palestinian scholars to be included at Scholars at Risk program. That's a very amazing positive mentality suggestion. But people can still say they don't want their name attached with Hebrew University, not just because it might not form legally in certain terms. There may be legal ambiguity, but there's a political opinion that I could say all of Hebrew University stands on occupied Palestine. But where is that conversation to be had? That's a different conversation altogether, right? Second itself, now you keep mentioning anti-Semitism, and that's really a serious problem. And all of us come with a basic decency and respect that that's not one way, not that. We don't tolerate that. We also don't expect to see in an esteemed campus like anti-Semitism. So when you throw that word around casually, I really don't know where it's coming from. Have you seen such incidents at Hertie? What exactly do you mean by anti-Semitism? Because every time we criticize the state of Israel, it's like there's a danger of anti-Semitism. Sure, there's danger of anti-Semitism. Can you also see the rising Islamophobia? Does that warrant any attention? Because I don't see, of course, all of these matter, but the criticism never went on those lines, and the debate has never gone on those lines. There has been no conversation that was even remotely anti-Semitic at campus, thankfully. So I don't see why that's always wielded, because for someone who has experiences, or if you're from the community that has history of being victims of anti-Semitism, just casually throwing that around also does not help. So I would like you to also reflect on that maybe a little bit.
Thank you, Namrita. Simina.
It's a very, very quick small callback from the session yesterday about polarization. My takeaway, it was that someone mentioned something like, the only way that we can have proper debates is to be able to put us in the position that the other person could be right for 1 second at least. And I can see, like here, in not only in this panel, but in the last 2 years, and especially in the last year, so much emotion in our discussions at the school. And in my first year, I was a chairperson in our student body. People yelled at me because I was not doing enough. I was trying to represent the student body in the best way that I could do it, but and not only myself, but other people. But people sometimes lose totally control. And I am calm enough to face that, but it's not the case of all the people who represent others. And in the last year, for some seconds, and it's very maybe selfish say this, but I was in some way happy that I was not representing the students, because all this situation was so much to manage that I can only admire the people who was, and including you, President Woll, but all the people who was facing this conversation in a daily basis. And even now, I have the strong feeling that people is not listening others sometimes. It's only talking to themselves very loud, which means that we are not allowing to listen the others. And I have the feeling that we need to start to train in some way that to be calm enough to listen the message of other people, and after that maybe start to think. I come from Latin America. I am very far of this situation. Sometimes for me it's really hard to follow even the conversation because I don't have all the references. I'm sorry for my ignorance, but I think that this also gives me the distance to try to be more objectively the situation And I think that in these kind of spaces, we need to listen others and then like create an opinion. If we are doing in the opposite way, this is not a proper debate, and we need to improve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Semima. Ariane, may I suggest, I'm taking the presidential authoritarian privilege to just extend until 30, so we are 15 minutes over time. That allows me to take 2 short comments, and then you get the first word back, and then whoever wants to respond, and we'll end at 5:30. So short comments, I see 2 hands up, which are the earliest, and Joanna Bryson can slip in at the end with a very, very short comment. But
can I start?
Then we'll answer.
Okay, hi, I'm Fabio, I'm also a graduating student. And I'm just like really, really happy that I like was here for this like last event like before I actually graduate, because like first of all like thank you to all of you who stepped up here. I think like it was like a really harsh critique, but it was like a really also respectful critique. And I think like especially like over the last half year, I mean we were all in the WhatsApp groups. We had like the Israel-Palestine WhatsApp group, and there was like stuff where I really thought, okay, this can't be real right now. And stuff that people would probably never say to each other face to face. I think just like by bringing this on this stage, and again, like even if I'm not like agreeing with everything, like I'm so happy that you all stepped up because something brought everything together a bit. And I think like saying the stuff here that we probably a lot of you like wanted to voice for like the last half of the year, I think that showed like how severe or like how necessary it actually was to have a forum like this. I think like we're a highly politicized school, like everybody has like their political opinions and also like a lot of different opinions. And I'm still thinking sometimes we're missing like the place to actually voice it. I mean, there are a lot of opinions. I think we can all go to Senate meetings, we have HSR who are doing their best jobs, but like still maybe these are not like the perfect opportunities to actually like bring together the discourse that especially like over the last half year was like so emotional. So I think like you just said, like in the end, Professor Woll, that like this could be the start to something. And I think like that goes especially also maybe to the students from first year who are here, as well as to the leadership, that maybe we should think about like new formats of how we can actually like have a discourse that is more like this and less like the WhatsApp groups. That was less question, but like I just want to say that.
But I very much second it. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. To keep myself short, I want to copy, I think, the previous comment too. I definitely agree with that. Maybe on the different topic, I really found interesting your take on AI, and I really would like to read the policy brief to get to a different topic, sorry. But I was also wondering, and I think you definitely thought about that when creating about the Moodle page, but I also would like to see a bit more of a critique also of AI and really showing what the limitations are. Especially also when thinking about creation, that I think AI is still very limited in what it can actually create, and instead it just rephrases thought that was already produced by actual humans beforehand. And I think there's still in society and also at Hertie a limited understanding of what are the actual abilities of AI and what it can actually do and where it really shouldn't be used, and where really I think in doing our research as academics is really still important. And yeah, that's kind of my comment. I really look forward to maybe taking a course of Joanna Bryson next year, but to learn more about these stuff.
Thank you very much on this, and that's a very nice transition to give you the last small comment space, and then one last set.
All right, so now I've got, quickly, I believe that there will be a Center for Digital Governance blog of this, so hopefully everyone will get to read it, with the permission of the authors, of course. I had my hand up right from the beginning because I knew that we wanted this to be a discussion. There was a call for it to be a discussion, and I thought, well, the faculty kind of have to discuss. But this is one of the cases the president was right. I'm so glad that I heard what the students were saying before I said anything. So thank you. You're right. I'm wrong. I will, but I'll do my little discussion anyway, since there's a little. Is there a minute? Yeah. So first of all, about colonialism. I have learned so much since coming here. You know, I came here because I was spending so much time in policy. I might as well be at a policy school, but I did not anticipate how much I would learn here. And I was just recently at the Euromed. I don't know if you know, it's like 47 countries or something, everybody who's bordering the Mediterranean plus the EU. And literally exactly what you're saying was said by one of the very senior representatives of Europe, saying, it's really good that we've straightened out the AI Act because now we know exactly what is correct and what is inviolable and we will not back down on. And I had to explain to them that human rights were contested, which I had not learned until I learned from my students in my AI class 2 or 3 years ago. So thank you very much for the points that you're making. I'm learning for the protests too. I'm learning from 20%, the reports of the protests. Thank you very much. Having said all that, if any of the people who are speaking who disagreed with the previous panel, so I very much appreciate the person who agreed with it, but any of the people who disagreed with what was said in the previous panel and heard what the previous panel said, I would love to hear that.
Thank you very much. Aryan, you're up first.
Okay. I've been out of school for quite some time now, and when I see all of this, I could just connect to what the future lies ahead. Like when you look at AI is going to change a lot of things for us. It's going to change the kind of skills we need. If you look at the World Economic Forum skills, 8 of the 10 skills, or literally 9 of those 10 skills, are social emotional learning skills. Now, one of the things that I see is, how many of you believe empathy is a very important skill? How many of you believe? Okay, quite a few of you, right? But one of the things that I feel is empathy is the problem here. And I'll tell you why empathy is a problem. Like, it's very natural for you to put yourself in somebody else's shoes when the shoes fit in. But when the shoes are not fitting, either if they're too big or too small, it's not easy for you to see the other side. And I think with the dialogue that I saw today, the friction that I did see here today, that points me to the fact that we as educational institutions are not focusing on the skills of the future. And I think this is also a call for Hertie to look at what are thriving skills and focus on some of these skills and move beyond empathy, because I think empathy comes very natural in group and compassion is a lot more easier when it comes to out group. So that would be my point. So thank you.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, but I'd like to get both Kasta and Saibrusni in just to spread the word to the speaking time. And Johannes, I'm going to cut you off. Helen also hasn't been able to answer. So the 3 people who haven't been able to answer, short statements, and then we have to go into a break.
Oh, okay, short statement. Okay. Just to answer your question of limitations of AI. I am by no way an expert of AI tools. Ask Joanna for that, but I obviously listened in her class, and so I can only make a fool of me now, because whatever I say now, she will hear. But so you're quite right. An AI is only as good as data it is trained on. So there are a lot of biases and failures introduced also, and an AI can be used for so many different things. That is one of my main takeaways from the class too. An AI is a tool. It depends on what you do with the tool and if you understand how it works. And I quite agree that we often do not understand enough how it works or the data it is trained on or how we can efficiently use it. But I do think that is a discussion that should be had, and maybe the AI guidelines would be even more improved if we include more details on that.
Thank you. Saibrusni.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the polarization question, because I feel like the reason there's so much polarization on the stage and in Hertie is because it's a reflection of the society that we're living in right now, and also the fact that Hertie did not do anything since October, and now to me that's why I refuse to be thankful to this event, because to me this merely feels like a PR stunt for their 20th anniversary. I would have obviously, this is too late. The reason you're seeing so much disagreement here and so much tensed emotions is because you're too late to address this. That's it.
Thank you. What was Caspar is up on my list. You have a 5-second that wanted to be...
5 seconds. Maybe it's time for a Hertie debating club to discuss more.
Okay. I think we have the 5. It's a debating club. So Caspar gets the concluding word, which is the most important one. Thank you for your patience.
All right. On the polarization point, I think universities are honestly not doing a bad job necessarily on this topic with events like these and the student events that have been allowed at the Hertie School and that students took the initiative for. Although I think to solve this issue society-wide is a way bigger problem, because I don't think there are any AfD, PVV, or NR voters at Hertie. So yeah. And then on the Palestine Uni, I would of course not be against having a Palestinian partner university, although none of the ones in Gaza are still functioning due to Israel's invasion, and a large part of the students are dead or have no homes to return to. Secondly, I can agree that talking to people from all over the world is very important, which is why I'm also here and also replying to you. It is, however, a different thing to have a tie to a university that is directly and systemically complicit in international law violations. My sense would be different if Hebrew University did not have that building on the French Hill and no ties to the Shin Bet security agency. The Hertie School could also choose to collaborate with an Israeli university that is less problematic, perhaps, although Maya Wind, in her book on Israeli universities, lines out why that would not be any of the big ones. So.
Thank you very much to all of you. I'd like to echo what has been said in the room. It is really a great pleasure to listen to you. I'm particularly proud myself to have been able to assist to this. I think it's a wonderful conclusion of a very tense and emotional academic year. And I have to say, I'm very proud of how you managed, despite all of this, to still hold together. I'd like to thank you for speaking up, and thank you to the audience for staying here as well.